Good evening, and welcome to a podcast in our series titled Past, Present, and Future Perspectives on Mental Health in the Black Community. This initiative consists of a series of podcasts, forums, and healing circles over a 6-month period that seek to expose the negative stigma associated with mental health, encourage open and honest discussions amongst men, women, and youth, and provide tangible solutions towards healing and recovery. And we want to show our appreciation to the City of Toronto for their financial support towards this worthy endeavor. Now, while the intention of this podcast is to create an environment of knowledge sharing, positive affirmations, and space for joy, some content may be emotionally triggering and of a sensitive nature. This episode of this podcast features content related to issues related to Black mental health, which may be emotionally triggering for some. If you or someone you know is triggered by this content or is experiencing a mental health issue, including having thoughts of suicide, support is available. Immediate telephone support is accessible by calling 211 or 1-855-310-2673. You can speak with a crisis worker at any time. Children and youth can also access telephone support 24/7 by contacting the Black Youth Helpline at 416-285-9944. For immediate emergency support, please call 911. My name is Richard Lambie, and I want to thank you for joining us for our podcast titled A Vision for the Future, Breaking the Cycle of Silence around Black mental health. In this podcast, we will address how members of the Black community in Canada can seek out and receive specialized services and appropriate care. The discussion will combat the issue of trauma within the Black community and a higher risk of mental health issues based on excessive exposure to poverty, stress, racism, and illness. We also look forward and envision the future of Black mental health while breaking the cycle, demonstrating the importance of investing in our mental health and how this investment will have a long-term positive impact for the community as a whole. Join our inaugural focus group session on Wednesday, June 29th at 5 p.m. Make your voice heard. Tell us what you think. What do we as a community need to do to address Black mental health? What are we doing well? What needs to change? We want to hear from you. At this point, I want to welcome Crystal Meek, who is a registered psychotherapist, public speaker, and advocate who has for over 15 years worked with diverse communities to promote mental health care and wellness. She is passionate about quality mental health support for the Black community and in addressing trauma through a social justice and cultural framework. Crystal continues to work with diverse communities while specializing in trauma, anxiety, depression with her private practice called Therapy Avenue. More information about her services is available and can be found at therapyavenue.ca. I'd like to welcome Ms. Crystal Meek. Thank you once again for joining us.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, you're very welcome. So while in this podcast, while we're continuing to raise awareness of Black mental health, I want to stress that we also want to look towards the future. Where do we want to go and how we will get there? Now, Crystal, what does the landscape right now in the GTA look like for mental health supports for the Black community, especially concerning trauma counseling?
Yes, this is a great question. While there has been some progress definitely in terms of acknowledging that mental health needs a closer look, acknowledging that mental health is part of our physical health. There's still a lot of gaps, unfortunately, that we really need to address. I get inundated with calls, really, looking for support from a Black therapist, especially or specifically. My waiting list is long, and that is just because there's just not enough Black psychotherapists. And this isn't because, Black individuals don't want to become psychotherapists. This is really because of a lot of different factors, including who gets the opportunities, and this starts from all the way back in grade school, right? Who gets the opportunities to apply to the so-called good schools like U of T and whatnot? Who gets the support from their guidance department in order to do that? Who gets support while they're getting through their undergrad to get to their master's, to get to their PhD? Who has enough money to do that? And this all boils down to not a lot of Black individuals always getting the opportunities that they should be getting, and the support that they should be getting, which really is what creates gaps. It creates gaps in terms of having representation within the mental health field, and it creates gaps in terms of being a voice in the room while people are even learning. I think about when I was doing my master's, and I was one of only two even racialized people in the room. And that was a group of people who are all getting ready to be therapists. And it makes a difference. Representation really makes a difference. And when the representation isn't there, it creates gaps. There's also gaps in terms of, there's many gaps.
So why do you made an important point.
Mm-hmm.
Why does the representation or lack thereof, why is that so important for our community?
Absolutely. So, often I will get people calling in for a consultation with me. And the first thing they'll say is, I've been looking for a long time for a Black therapist. And sometimes I joke with them and I say, well, you could have picked any therapist. And they say, well, no, I have needs and that are specific to being a Black individual. And I get it. I totally get it. My first therapist was a Black individual too. And I even sought out a Black individual as well as my first step into working on my own mental health. It's important. There's a familiarity, but it goes far beyond that. There's also an understanding of culture. There's an understanding of when certain things are said to really get a deeper understanding of what that really means. When somebody says, in my office, my parents were never home; they were always working. Some people might go to, oh, they neglected you, and I go to, oh, that's the immigrant experience. And because of that, you might have suffered in some ways, but I get it. I get why they were doing that and why they needed to do that. So it's not that people who are not Black can't understand this. It's just that often people are just wanting someone who can and are hoping to find that representation within the safe space of their therapist's office.
Okay, thank you so much. It's definitely a concern that I see out there as well. And on that theme, we all know that mental health has no color, that anyone from any race can be affected by mental health issues. What barriers do you see African Canadians face when trying to access mental health support?
Absolutely. That's a good question. There are, while, these supports are out there for everybody, what we do often see is individuals who are racialized, specifically individuals from the African Canadian community, when we want to seek mental health supports, there can be quite a few challenges, historical challenges that kind of come with us, such as, as a community, we have faced a lot of oppression. We've faced a lot of racism. And because of this, often there comes with a mistrust of systems, a mistrust of the healthcare system. The healthcare system, not just not easy to navigate for Black individuals, but sometimes can be unfair, especially historically. So when it comes to now looking for mental health supports, sometimes it does take an extra layer of support within the community to connect individuals with mental health support. Sometimes it does take, the social worker to kind of organize this. We see a lot of people within our community who don't have family doctors. And while this is a concern for, I think, all of Canada, as we've probably heard on the news many times, it's especially a concern with Black individuals, because finding individuals that we can trust, that we can rely on, might take a few extra steps or a few extra supports put in place because of the historical oppression. Now, also within the Black community, we also find that there are a lot of individuals who were raised in a way of, we don't talk about these things, don't bring my business on road or in the streets, and this is what a lot of us were taught. So now to have to kind of push through that and kind of unlearn that in order to be like, I think I need to actually go outside of the house and get support. It might take some acknowledgement of, hey, what is stopping me? Are there internal barriers that are stopping me from reaching out? And then where are those supports, right? And looking for those supports. Another concern that is another part of the gaps that we face is there are a lot of supports for people who are experiencing acute mental health crises. So, if someone's having an emergency, they can go to the emergency room at the hospital or the emergency department and seek support. But then for ongoing care, we now get kind of funneled into, maybe there's a program that gives maybe 6 sessions to 10 sessions max, but often people are just getting used to the individual that they're working with, and then their sessions are done. And then individuals often say, well, okay, so where do I go for continued support? It's a gap. It's not really there unless you're paying out of pocket. So this is a gap within our healthcare system that does need to be addressed. And it does deeply affect our community because of the extra supports that are necessary for us to get connected with the proper supports.
And again, we're speaking with Crystal Meek, a registered psychotherapist who has her own practice called Therapy Avenue. You can reach her at therapyavenue.ca. Now, in preparation for this podcast, we spoke about a number of things, but one of the things we talked about was the compounding issue that stems from Black men and women being misdiagnosed by Black healthcare professionals, and that this element, this aspect of healthcare could help solve many of the issues that are faced in our community, especially dealing with mental health. And why is that issue of being misdiagnosed so important in this aspect?
Absolutely. There is a specific, again, historically, because of the way that systemic issues are just kind of embedded within our different institutions, such as the healthcare system, judicial system, and whatnot, education system, because there's sometimes inherent racism there, that, historically, not calling any individual who works in those systems racist. It's just embedded in a way that is still we're still working to eradicate. Sometimes Black bodies are just looked at differently, right? No matter what the gender. Sometimes individuals are looked at, oh, you guys can take more stress, or oh, you can take more pain, or oh, we'll see if you still have this issue next time. And it's not seen sometimes as concerning as sometimes our counterparts. And what ends up happening is either a lack of diagnosis, as, oh, it sounds like you're experiencing anxiety, or oh, you're experiencing depression. It becomes, sometimes it can be, I've heard many people say, oh, my doctor says I need to get a new job. And it's like, well, maybe eventually, but what we really need is supports for your anxiety. We really need supports for your your mental health concerns, or support through your life transition. And so in within our community, it's tough for some individuals to get properly diagnosed. One example could be if sometimes an individual comes in and they seem high strung, and the doctor sometimes can say, oh, well, it seems like you're just kind of hyper, opposed to saying, let me do an actual evaluation to see if there's something deeper going on here. I've had a lot of people come through my office who have had to send back to the doctor multiple times, and with a letter from myself before they were taken seriously, and then they were properly diagnosed with whether it be borderline personality disorder, or bipolar is one that often goes overlooked, and whatnot. And I noticed that a lot of the individuals who were coming from sometimes lower income households were being misdiagnosed at a higher rate, and I think it might have something to do with the doctor's perception. Also, sometimes a lot of doctors don't have as much knowledge as mental health as we think. The doctors that do have knowledge of mental health are normally people who have taken extra steps and taken extra courses beyond what they're required to take, or psychiatrists who specialize in mental health. But not every doctor is versed in mental health. So it's really important, if you notice as an individual or a family member or somebody that you care about is struggling with their mental health, and they don't really feel like they're getting support that they need when they go to the doctor, that they really request to see a psychiatrist and not be afraid, or request to see or get a referral to a healthcare professional within the mental health field who's specifically trained in mental health.
So that's such an important point that I want to emphasize here, because I know that in a lot of instances, people feel, and even doctors sometimes feel like they should not be challenged, even if you don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, and that you like whatever they're diagnosing, whatever they're saying, they need to be able to explain it to you. How important is that, do you feel, in being able to allow the doctor to expect the doctor to explain what they're telling you and not just to accept whatever they're saying?
Yes, I think that's a big deal, because it's not lost on me that the doctors are under tons of pressure, right? Often they're allowed to keep a client in their space, or a patient in their space, for no more than 6 minutes. So you're rushed in, you're rushed out, and they're trying to get to the next person, and they often don't feel like they have the time to sit down and explain. But it's up to us as individuals to really request that, and say, I'm not prepared to leave yet until I get some explanation as to what the next steps are. And just really advocating for ourselves in the healthcare spectrum, like the healthcare arena, is vitally important. For some of my clients who have experienced challenges, I've had especially a lot of African Canadian women express a lot of challenges around being diagnosed, or having having years and years go by before they get an actual diagnosis, and experiencing years and years of physical suffering, which causes psychological suffering and mental health suffering. And a few of them I had to say, well, you know what, your doctor is liable. So next time you go in, you can go in and you can ask the doctor for a referral to a healthcare, a psychiatrist or whatever you need. And if they refuse, then just ask them to make a note in your file that you asked them for a specific service and they refused it. And 100% of the time, the doctor has gone ahead and said, okay, I'll just give you the referral. Because at the end of the day, they are liable for what they diagnose or don't diagnose. And so they'd rather, do their due diligence and send you to a specialist opposed to having it be on the file that they refused it. And that's just one example of a way to kind of advocate for yourself in that arena if you feel you're not getting the appropriate support.
That is an excellent suggestion. Are there any other suggestions you have for that?
Because of the amount of people who tend to come into my office with chronic issues that are often unresolved, or they're coming to work on the trauma from having years of a misdiagnosis or something undiagnosed, I often will suggest to them, not suggest, but ask them if they think it might be an appropriate step to write a letter, and that letter might be to the doctor, which would stay in the client's file. That letter might be based on the circumstance, perhaps to the department of a hospital, or that letter might be to the College of Surgeons and Physicians, really outlining their experience and letting them take it from there.
So creating a paper trail then.
Yes.
Of your concerns that then can be followed up in the future should nothing happen as a result of the letter.
Yes. And the reason, why we're talking about this, people might think, oh, well, you're talking about physical health. I thought this was about mental health. Well, mental health is health. Mental health is physical health. And when your physical, I'm sure most people know because they've experienced it, when your physical health is affected, your mental health begins to deteriorate because it's just hard to manage. It's hard to deal. The life gets harder to live. And we want to make sure that we're well taken care of, not just other parts of our body, but also our brains. Mm-hmm.
That's so true. That is just so absolutely true. They have the saying, what is it? Mind, body, and spirit. It isn't. It isn't just folklore.
Yeah, they're not separate.
They're all connected.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, looking to the future, where do you feel the government focus should be on making sustainable improvements when it comes to mental health supports for the Black community? What specific investments do you think is needed? And we've started to speak on this, but how can we in the Black community advocate for better health support? So what is it we can do? Again, this is an election time right now. So this is an opportune time to address this. We all know there are deficiencies in the healthcare system that even 20 years ago, 15 years ago didn't exist. What should the government be doing at this point?
Absolutely. It's a good question. I right off the bat, the first thing that comes to mind is I go to sleep almost every night wishing that mental health was free. I wish it was free, meaning paid for through OHIP. Mental health is health, and mental health is in our health, and our health is a right in this country, right? And mental health is health, and we have to start thinking about it that way, and start really like, holding those who, manage divvying out our taxes appropriately. We're paying taxes in this country. And you're right, what you said, it's an election year. So it's time to like really take a look at different platforms that different parties have, and seeing who is prioritizing mental health, and really hold those individuals accountable. Besides that, I think funding, the journey has started with, like, the government trying to figure out where can we put funding, where is appropriate. Even spaces like just this podcast is, really beginning to open up the conversations around mental health. These are places to start, but we have to actually be starting to reach the individuals and the families and the communities with mental health supports, whether that looks like funded mental health supports within community centers that are not based on limitations. Often when we do have supports, it will be based on, okay, we can have a group, and this group can only run for 6 sessions, and we have to have a new group of people. Well, sometimes people just got comfortable after 6 sessions and just started to open up and just started to feel familiar and feel safe to really start talking about these things. And sometimes 6 sessions is not even enough for somebody who is trying to work on traumas. So we really have to or the government really has to start prioritizing long-term mental health supports. And, what we do know is within these social determinants of health, when mental health is not taken care of, it begins to really wear on our physical health. And it begins to translate into chronic disease. It begins to translate into long-term illness. It begins to translate, if trauma is left unchecked, it begins to translate to intergenerational trauma, which affects our offspring's health and well-being. This is a big deal, and if the government was paying more attention, perhaps also a bigger price tag. So hopefully, government will begin to streamline money to healthcare professionals, such as psychotherapists like myself, social workers that do psychotherapy, to be able to open up spots for community members without limits, because that's really, really what's needed.
These are some excellent comments, and in terms of advocacy as well, one thing that certainly could happen, persons such as yourself, other Black psychotherapists, psychiatrists, along with citizens, possibly even forming a group to really advocate for health, not just mental health, but as you say, kind of looking at the supports as a holistic unit, and trying to assess what is there now from a community standpoint. I think looking at it from a community standpoint, community health, making sure things are there in local areas so that travel is minimized, and then also making sure that persons who are familiar with you. You mentioned the importance of familiarity, that if you only have 6 sessions, that you're only just getting to know them. In the case of mental health, but even beside mental health, I mean, just going to have a discussion, on how you're feeling. Maybe just a quick discussion is all you need. And maybe having that community-based support with someone familiar, in a particular area, maybe, and I do think some of that is out there, but maybe having some more of that. And us as a community, as a Black community, advocating for these types of supports and reaching out to the politicians and advocating for funds to be directed in those areas. Maybe that's something that can be looked at as well, with you as the professionals being able to bring the detail. I'm not going to know what you know, but I know I'm not getting support, for example. So how it's broken down can be assisted by someone as a professional such as yourself. So I think that Yeah, I think that's definitely something that can be added to the conversation. And while I say this, I just want to remind our listeners of our other supports that we have. We have healing circles during this 6-month mental health awareness campaign for the Black community. We want to remind people of our healing circles because when these things are being addressed, we want to see that you get the support you need. The healing circles are a safe space for persons of African descent. We focused on people of African descent in these healing circles to be able to provide more traditional ancestral type of therapy for people who may need it. In addition, I just gave you my opinion, my thoughts on what can be done. We also have focus groups. The focus groups are a space where you can give your thoughts. You can let us know what's working, what isn't working, what can be done. How can we advocate for better? How can we do better ourselves in the community? Looking at how we can support each other, people who are in need but are too ashamed to talk about it, afraid to talk about it. How can we encourage them to step forward and take action? We're having healing circles every month, and it's going through from May, June, July, August, and September and October. Focus groups we're having bi-monthly. The first one is Wednesday, June the 29th. We'll have another one in August, and then we'll have another one in October. Go to our social media page at Black to the Future TO and look us up, look at our posts, and join us. Be heard, and please contribute towards this very important endeavor. Now, I want to again remind you that we're speaking with Crystal Meek, who is a Black psychotherapist who has her own practice called Therapy Avenue. And for more information, feel free to inquire with her at therapyavenue.ca. So our final question that we will look at, with everything we've spoken about, looking at the issues that are out there, and also starting to touch on what can we try to do to make things better for us as a community, how can we reframe our view of Black mental health? We know that in the Black community, not just the Black community, but all around, mental health is definitely something as a stigma. It's something that sometimes we don't take very seriously. We push those persons aside. We try to avoid them. We don't try to embrace them. We're afraid. We're embarrassed. We don't want to talk about it. How can we reframe our view of Black mental health in such a way as to move forward and to make the improvements that we so desperately need?
Absolutely. It's such an important question. Sometimes in our community, we will think about mental health and we automatically conjure up a picture in our mind of, somebody who's having a complete, acute mental episode and either, in the streets taking off their clothes or something. Oh, they need lots of help. But really, mental health is health, right? If any other part of our body was hurting or had a little pain or needed a little support, we would go get the support. If our knee hurts, we go get the support. If our foot is sick, we go and I'll get a doctor, my foot is sick. So if our brain needs support, if our brain chemistry is a little bit off, if we find that we're struggling a little bit more and we want to struggle less, then it's okay. It's okay to say, hey, I could really use some support. Maybe it's time for me to, Google and like how to get support with anxiety or depression or grief or addiction, or how to even set boundaries with my family members, how to not feel so triggered in certain environments and feel so upset and distressed in certain environments. Maybe I need to go get help with this. And so really just shedding the shame around it. There's no shame in when any other part of us needs help. There shouldn't be any shame when our brain needs some support as well, or our nervous system. And really just reframing all health is health. All right. And all health, we have a right to this health. And mental health is part of our body. It's part of health. So yeah, that's probably the first step, is really just acknowledging that there's no shame that needs to be had. We can drop the shame. We can walk we can walk in the truth that if we're working on it, then it's going to get better. And but if we're not acknowledging it and we're ignoring it, then it's just sitting there and it's just staying there and it's still a problem. So yeah, really beginning to open up those conversations, opening up conversations about mental health or about something that you or a family member might be struggling with, is the first step, and is so important. And there can be so much healing that can come about in that space, or opening up that conversation with just somebody safe and trusted.
And I appreciate these comments because, again, especially the fact that when we think of mental health, we think of somebody in the middle of the road in front of cars taking off their clothes, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be having a consistent negative feeling that you can't explain. And it may be situational, but then maybe it's completely out of the blue. And being able to identify these things and realizing that even just talking to somebody might help. It may not necessarily need to resort to a professional, but just having those tools to know, what options are there and how and just being able to address it with knowing what choices are out there, and certainly not just leaving it and doing nothing about it.
Absolutely. And can I just say, therapy is for everyone. Often people, even my friends, will say, well, what kind of people come to therapy, and is it dangerous or something? I said, no, it's everyday people who come to therapy, your next door neighbor, your family member, just everyday people. The people that sometimes people have a vision of, people who come to therapy are deeply disturbed or have something that that is they can't move forward in life at all. No, just everyday people come to therapy, just working on everyday issues.
That's so true. And it's such an important point as well. So, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, Crystal. Again, we're really hoping people can tune in to these podcasts, the healing circles and the focus groups. Go to Black to the Future TO, follow us, get in tune with what's happening during this 6-month period. We will be featuring different persons, different speakers. We want people to recognize the importance of mental health in the Black community, quote unquote, Black mental health, and how it is such an important aspect of moving the community forward. Without mental health, we don't move forward. We can try, but it's pretty well an impossibility. Again, I want to thank you, Crystal, for your time.
Thank you.
And anyone who's interested, please go to therapyavenue.ca. Do you have a phone number you'd like to share, Crystal?
Yep, you can reach me at therapyavenue.ca, or you can call me at 416-624-7627. But all that information, all my contact information will be at therapyavenue.ca as well.
That is amazing. So, once again, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate this, and we need to continue this conversation.
Absolutely.
And we're from our perspective, Black to the Future, we're going to continue to do what we can to bring this issue to the light, and continue to tackle this very difficult issue. But you on the front line, you have such an important fight as well, if we could call it that, and that we need to have more of you out there providing support and giving these conversations, giving these talks, letting people know that it isn't something to hide from, that it isn't something to be afraid of. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to embrace, and that all of us need it.
Absolutely. It's just all about healing our minds, healing our hearts, and moving forward.
Absolutely. Once again, I want to thank you for your time, Crystal. We wish you all the best in your endeavors. We'll certainly be talking again, and I just want to wish you all the best for your business.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure and an honor. Take care.
All right. All the best. Join our inaugural focus group session on Wednesday, June 29th at 5 p.m. Make your voice heard. Tell us what you think. What do we as a community need to do to address Black mental health? What are we doing well? What needs to change? We want to hear from you.